Thank you for staying with us. This is Nigeria Decides. Now, we will be looking at the economic implication of the postponement on the elections. And to discuss this, we have Segun Sopitan. He is a financial expert and he's also of the Accountability, Candor and Transparency Network. It's good to have you in the studio.
Good morning, Segun. Now, when you also received the news of the postponement, what readily came to your mind? Now, this time you're talking business, because at the end of the day, we know Nigeria is a commodity-dependent economy, and such a shutdown of businesses on a weekend which we know thrives on business. What does this mean, really?
Yeah. So the first thing that I thought was, why the short notice? Because that's the real issue, if you take the politics away and all of that, if you want to postpone the elections because you have logistics issues and all that, it's fine, it's your decision, but you can't foist that on us at 2 a.m. of the day of the elections, because everything that is going to happen with regards to that day has happened already. You can't reverse it. Businesses have shut down, monies have been spent, schools have been closed. You can go on, the borders are closed. So the economy has basically been shut down. And, you can't reverse it. And I think that's the real issue for me. So that's what came to my mind.
But in what area should we now be looking at? Because now let's be perspective about it. Looking at the aviation sector, we know how much of flights coming in and going out of Nigeria would cost on the average.
Yep.
We look at even our customs as well, income generation would also be affected. And then small businesses.
Absolutely.
Really, how should governments now be reading all of these meaning, especially INEC, so that in every single step of their way this time around, they have to understand that there is a need to be accountable to the Nigerian?
Well, one of the ways that you can look at this is to just say, what's the cost of this to the Nigerian economy? Our GDP is roughly about $500 billion. Divide that roughly again by 365 days and you get an impression of what we've lost. Today, as an economy, we've thrown away 500 billion naira in GDP, in revenues. We're looking at the numbers now, not the impact on the lives, not the human angle, and the personal economies of people. Just looking at the numbers from a GDP point of view. You've lost today, and you have not only lost today, you're still going to lose next Saturday, because the elections have been postponed, so you're going to repeat this. So we're saying, 2 days of our GDP is gone forever. Can't get it back.
Well, we did speak to the head of strategy for Heritage Bank, and he did give us his perspective on this. Let's take a look at that clip.
Business banks and other businesses, even schools, force children to vacate on the name of midterm so that they can actually stay with their parents before the election. Now, the election has been postponed. Nigeria is a trading economy. For that to be disrupted like this, it means the loss cannot be underestimated. And like you said, it will happen again. To me, even in a normal environment, things like this actually lead to not less than 1 to 2% decline in GDP of an economy that's highly dependent on GDP, on trading. So there's no doubt business will be affected, but life goes on anyway. Knowing fully well that business on weekend in Nigeria Lagos, where socioeconomic activities used to take place, quite a lot of, other parties, other of wedding, other of funerals, and those are people who generate cash that actually flow into the financial system.
Today, the plan by banks is nobody will move around, talk less of trying to really make provision for people who go upload those ATMs. Now that has been cancelled, we know the implication of that. Most ATMs will be there running generator, running diesel without cash to dispense. Because eventually, later in the day, you see people going out. So there will be loss in income because there's no plan towards it. So things like this there's no way. It has to be negative, but good enough. Banks have deployed quite a lot of alternative channels. Because internet will still be on. If you want to transfer, you can transfer, you can do all that. But the only thing is, like ATMs, like branches, that are affected. But good enough. The alternative channels, I think they are there.
Looking at listening to what he has to say, it's almost something close to what you have said. But he said something that I think is a bit too casual. Life goes on. How long can we keep being that casual about stuff like this when we know that the rippling effect might be a bit more damaging than the way he sounds?
Well, unfortunately, it's the reality. Whether we like it or not, the decision has been made, and life will indeed go on. But the point must be made that people that are making these decisions must factor in these things, must understand. INEC needs to understand that this decision is going to cost Nigeria at least 500 billion naira. Just that decision to postpone so late. You know, so yes, life goes on, but for me, like I was saying earlier, there has to be some sort of a consequence for this.
So what sort of sentiment do you also think this would also throw into the forex market? Because we know that when you're having elections coming closely, the forex market also immediately reacts to that. So do we still expect the level of uncertainty and investment to continue just as much as we've seen in the last week?
Incidentally, you know, quite unusually, the forex market, the naira has actually been appreciating over the last month or thereabouts against the US dollars.
But we understand that regularly elections come with sentiment
with uncertainty. So now with the uncertainty that this decision creates, you will definitely see a movement over the next 2 or 3 days in the forex markets, because what this says to people is they don't know. We don't know what's going to happen next week. So investors will move their money.
Before the elections, just sometime in December, a lot of international companies that, you know, somewhat were played within the Nigerian foreign forex market took out their monies and, you know, went elsewhere. Now that this is also happening, do you see those people returning anytime soon?
They will come back because the Nigerian market is still relatively, comparatively, a profitable market to the international person. You know, if you want to do a comparative analysis for, say, for instance, as an institutional investor, if I want to invest in the European economy, what's the highest return I can get? 1-2% per annum. But you bring your money into the Nigerian Stock Exchange year on year. In the last, even when we had our bust, you were still talking 25-35% per annum returns. This is driven by inefficiency, but, you know, the investor, you know, it's good for the investor because he can make his money. So, yes, the uncertainty will drive the money out, but it's temporary. The money will come back.
And what do you make of this assertion by some school of thought that think that, well, within the business sector, you've been able to cash as much as possible from trade-ins that happened on Friday? There was a whole lot of transactions that happened on Friday. People bought foodstuffs. People had to transfer monies and withdraw monies and a whole lot more. So they don't necessarily think that it should be a bad market today.
Well, it's two sides of the coin. So yes, there's been a lot of business that was expected, that was planned for. But then what has now happened with this postponement is that people have spent money they wouldn't have spent on these things, that they would have spent on other things that would have driven growth and more business. You know, so next Saturday, they're going to do this again. People went to supermarkets yesterday, like you said. People bought fuel. I mean, I'm sure you'd have noticed, you know, there were queues all over the filling stations because people were stocking up for their generators and for their cars because of the uncertainty. They will repeat that again next week, and that is waste. That money would have been spent on investment or whatever else that people were going to do that would have driven growth. So that money is down the drain.
And talking about what's led to us coming down here, where we are looking at a downturn in the business trends as well, we know that the late disbursement of funds for INEC is one of the contributory factors, although INEC hasn't come out to clearly say that has been the issue. But how do you say we move things forward? In our earlier conversation, we're talking about the way forward, ensuring that we have the appropriation bill sent as much as possible passage and all of that. Even pegged at over 100 billion naira for the election, how do you think we're supposed to be strategizing to counter such a situation where we'll continuously have postponements just because of late fund release?
I'm not sure that I support the late funds release argument, because INEC chairman himself, more than 2 weeks ago, categorically stated that they were ready. When the issue of the budget delay and all of that came up, he said it wasn't going to be a problem, that they will still find a way around it. So maybe he was being optimistic, and it's different now. To answer your question, I think that it's all about legislation. One of the problems is that there are no consequences for bad behavior. I keep saying this. In this country, you do something wrong or bad, you get away with it. It's impunity. So if, for instance, INEC knows that there is a law that says that if you are compelled to postpone the elections and it results in this is what is going to happen to you. Maybe I don't know, maybe a query, I always try not to go overboard with my suggestions and all of that, but there is no consequence. So we need to find a way to make sure that somebody takes responsibility and suffers a consequence for this.
But talking about suffering, and we're all talking about businesses and what they suffer, but INEC has spent money, whether we like it or not, in preparation for today.
Absolutely.
So an equivalent of that money spent for today is going to be needed to do that of next week. And let's not forget that there was a drag between the National Assembly and the executive on the same issue of monies. Where's the money going to come from?
It's a very, very good question. So right now, what's going to happen is that at some point or the other, environment would have to be done because they're going to have to spend money again. This is completely extra budgetary. And we're talking of money in the billions. If you think about the money that INEC will spend moving sensitive materials from the CBN.
Across country.
8,800 wards, or if you like, 190,000
polling
units across the country. That's massive money in the billions, in the hundreds of millions. If you think about the money that the security infrastructure would have to be paid, deployment of police officers across the various polling units, they would have to be given some sort of an allowance. That's going to have to be repeated again. And you can go on and on. INEC will pay the youth corpers, they're going to pay their own staff, they're going to pay the other ad hoc staff. All of that money is gone, and we're spending it again next week. So, yeah, they'll find the money.
Let's talk about the positive side of this, the trickling effect this would have. Just like INEC personnel are being shuffled around the country, so the person in Lagos might go to Abia, and so they need accommodation, so they will be paying for hotels, they will be feeding. There are some beneficial aspects to this, right?
Yeah. Well,
even though today has been cancelled.
I struggle to see it as a benefit. Yes, some people will profit from this. The hotels will profit, but I tend to want to take the view that that money that the hotel is making is money that would have been spent on something else, and something that would have probably been more productive for the economy as a whole. So the hotel managers and all of them will smile to the bank, yes. But what about all of the lost business? What about the weddings? What about supermarkets that have been closed? What about, you can go on and on about all the businesses that are losing money today that cannot be reversed.
So the losers are over.
The losses are way more than
gains.
whatever benefits we would like to find, because you want to keep some sort of a positive narrative.
I think David asked that question before, but I want to put it in a different way. How do we make sure that we don't make the same mistakes over and over again? Because they say it's stupidity to actually do things the same way over and over, hoping for a different outcome.
That's a very difficult question, and I'll tell you why.
From a financial perspective?
There's really nothing you can do financially. This is a political issue, it's an administrative issue, it's a logistic issue. So the finance will find its way, and it will happen one way or the other. You waste money, you don't. But to prevent this, I have been saying to people that INEC is a part of our civil service, our public service, that is not known for its legendary efficiency. There's a lot of low productivity and inefficiency in our public services, and INEC is one of them. So if we want to prevent this from happening, we need to start getting the whole country. That's why I said it's a difficult question. It's a fundamental problem. This is one of the problems that Nigeria as a country has, a dysfunctional public service that government is sitting atop.
So you're saying that there's a tendency or a possibility of this happening over and over
again
because it is engraved in our system.
You don't have to be Methuselah. I'm sorry. You don't have to be, Aristotle, the great philosopher, to know that this will happen again. It will.
Wow.
Now, the head of strategy of Heritage Bank said that we should expect that these shutdown would affect about 1 to 2% of the GDP to the country, since we are dependent on most trading. Now, how do you expect things to change to meet this sharp twist of fate that we've experienced so far. Now, Monday to Friday, what do you think trading would be like in general, from the forex markets to a whole lot of markets across board?
There is going to be a lull in activities. I mean, everything is going to be low-key for this 1 week because, you know, decisions have been made. People have left places. People traveled from the north, shut their businesses down, came down south. Their intention was they will come for these presidential elections and then they'll go back maybe a week later. They're stuck now for 2 weeks. This 1 week is a period when business activities generally are going to go down. And that obviously, which is what I imagine that the gentleman was talking about, would have an impact on the GDP, because that's a week of. So we've been told from the report from the Nigerian, the NBS, that the GDP has grown 1.93% or thereabouts year on year, and we are seeing a resurgence. This will definitely be a dampener. I don't think it will be enough to significantly affect the eventual performance of the economy on the overall over the 1 year period, but you know, definitely things are going to be a bit low-key this week.
It makes me wonder. I mean, there are people who get very apprehensive during elections to even trade in stock because they do not know where, you know, the results will go. Will that also affect us one way or the other? Because now the stakes are higher than it has ever been in the history of Nigeria's democracy. Are we still going to see more people just hesitant? Like you said, there's going to be a law.
Absolutely.
But are they just going to literally just say, you know, let's put our hands in our pockets and just hope or wait and see what happens before we get involved?
I can give you an example. I sit on the board of a microfinance bank, and we were supposed to have a strategy session to plan for the next 5 years for our bank, and which could have resulted in some immediate implementation actions over the next 2 or 3 months. We had to postpone it because of the elections, because we said to ourselves, whatever you do, you are planning long term. The outcome of this election would have a very major bearing on that. So we postponed that, and now the elections have been postponed. You know, so that's more uncertainty. That's more of us sitting back and saying, well, we don't know.
What about lendings to the small and medium enterprises and across board as well? Because the banking sector as well would also have its fair share of apprehension and want to take some due measure to also reduce whatever cost they might have to expend. So now that we are going into the election come next week, Saturday, how do you think we'll see lending go through for the next 6 months in general?
On the whole, on the overall, I don't expect any significant effect on those types of things, because the decisions that drive lending and all that is about viability of the projects that are presented, the ability of the potential borrower to provide adequate security, comfort for the bank.
You know, when a new government comes in, it's usually a slower pace.
So what will happen? Yes. So what will happen over the next maybe 2 months? 2 months is for people to sit back and see, first of all, who's won. Once that decision has been made, once we've had the election and a winner has emerged and a loser has emerged, there will be an idea and a sense of what direction the economy is going to be going in, and business will pick up again. So yes, there will be a bit of a downplay of decisions, especially the long-term ones. So maybe, for instance, as a bank, I probably will want to be careful between now and the next 2 months, the kind of long-term loans that I commit myself to. Infrastructure loans, you know, maybe agriculture, 2-3 year loans, because I don't know who's coming in and what he may do or may not do. But once the elections are over, then an idea will come and people can move forward.
All right.
Thank you very much for speaking with us, Segun Sopitan. It's been a pleasure having you and talking business.
Always a pleasure to be here.
All right. Nigeria Decides will continue when we come back from the break. Stay tuned.